So welcome to a conversation with Cian Ó Maidín, founder of NearForm, and we're really looking forward to talking about all things open source and the amazing COVID app that NearForm has developed. But to start off with, Cian, I'd love to just know the origin story of NearForm and how it came about.
So around, I suppose, 2011 or thereabouts, I just come out of doing a startup that hadn't worked out very well, and I was kind of faced with a decision as to whether I go and get a job or whether I go again and start something new, and had a kind of a bruising enough experience in startup number one, and probably came quite close to going getting a job, but then decided to have another go, and so in 2011. I met my co-founder, and he was very interested in a new technology called Node.js at the time, and the two of us kind of decided we'd start a company where we would really try and become one of the cheerleaders for Node.js, which is an entirely new thing around 2010, 2011. So we kind of we went into starting up starting a technology first company with a view to that the technology was going to become really, really popular, and at the time it actually wasn't. So we founded a business in 2012. We very much could see, I suppose, going back to my career as a software engineer and working in startups, that there was a lot of change going on at the time. Mobile had become a really big thing. Web technologies were there was kind of a renaissance going on around the web platform. JavaScript and HTML were really becoming kind of first class citizens of the application development space and all that. And it became clear then that this new technology called Node.js would enable developers and people who wanted to build software to do it much more quickly. So we thought we were going to get rich in like a year, and that was not the case. We started NearForm. We were kind of almost at risk of being the Betamax company for a while there, because nobody was using the technology that we were cheerleading, and so 2012, we really bootstrapped the company as it was starting. We organized the first Node conference in Europe, kind of late 2012, and then I spent a number of years really on the road after that. Spent an awful lot of time in the US. It was really the only place that people were using the technology in a serious way, but like we basically became kind of known as the evangelists for this thing, and then in 2013, kind of late in the year, some really big companies started to use it. So Walmart and PayPal, they kind of came out, and they were doing fairly ambitious digital transformations where Node.js and open source technology was at the core of that. And once that kind of validation kind of happened in the market, that this was the right platform for the future, then our phone started ringing, and we started landing like big customers in the US and in the UK and stuff like that. So like our first US customer was NBC Universal. Our second US customer was Condé Nast. So we started working with their technology organizations. They were going all in, building a next generation media platforms, and so like at early stage gigs for them, we worked on Vogue magazine from Tramore in County Waterford, Golf Digest, Teen Vogue, the New Yorker, and then as we started to grow as a business, we then started to have enough revenue and profits that we could actually invest in maintainers to work on the open source project. So we'd obviously benefited a huge amount by our association with the project, but then it was just like the right thing that we'd start to try and contribute something back to it, and so the company's grown quite a lot. Like from the early days, we're kind of around 150 people now, In the last few years, we've been the biggest contributor to the Node.js project. We're one of the biggest contributors to the JavaScript module ecosystem. And it's very personally very compelling for me. I kind of come from a background whereby, when I was coming up as an engineer, you really had kind of, a couple of technology platforms that you could pick if you wanted to build something, but they were all centrally managed. It was either kind of Microsoft or Java. Really, those are the two platforms. And the idea that you would have like a kind of a global community of software engineers contributing and building bits of technology that they'd share with one another, and you could contribute, collaborate with them on those things is really compelling. So, I guess as we started to get known as a company in that ecosystem, then a lot of the kind of talented people and a lot of the people who were doing some of the really important projects gravitated towards NearForm and started to want to come and work here. So I think at this point in time, from the wider kind of group of people working NearForm, we've something like 1 billion, I think it's 1 billion modules a month are downloaded globally that have been written by NearForm. It's all free. We don't get paid for open source. But like everyone from Netflix to Apple to MasterCard, like all these giant companies are using modules and bits of technology we've developed here in Ireland and Europe or whatever. So that's kind of cool. Kind of like that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a great origin story and a fantastic potted history there of NearForm to date. And something that you would be considered advocates for is open source technology. But I'm sure people are wondering now, wait, hold on, people aren't paying for it. How are you making money as a company? So how important is it for you to be an open source company, and how do you become a successful company and working in that space?
Yeah, I mean, the analogy for open source technology, like you have different things, from everything from Open Office is like a piece of open source, which is an application that a lot of people would use, to you have like programming languages and tools and things you would use to build applications, and it's more in that space is where we reside. So the analogy is like that you're trying to build a piece of software. It's like you want to build a house, right? The house is what you want. The open source tools and technologies and frameworks and all that stuff, they're analogous to like building blocks. They're analogous to like cavity blocks and door handles and fasteners and screws and rivets and all that kind of thing. And so like those little components that you stitch together, like they don't really have a kind of strategic value to any one commercial company as such. However, they're necessary, like if you want to build an application. So the nice thing about open source is that if I have to invest in a new piece of scaffolding or a new component or something to build an application, and I open source that, then other people will use it, which is nice, but then also other people will contribute back to that. So they'll actually start to add some value back into that thing that we share. And that's really, really powerful. So, ultimately, like being able to use all these kind of components and things to build your applications means that you can build them much more quickly. You can turn things around, get to market much faster than before. And that's really, really powerful, because like the world in which we live now, like there's this exponential demand increase in the need for software and digital technologies, and there's really only a linear growth in people who can actually do the work. So the solution to that is that you have more of these kind of composable building blocks as piece of open source that people can use to get the job done and build apps and so from a NearForm perspective, like I mean. Our involvement in the web open source ecosystem is really core to who we are. We invest like quite a large amount of our revenue into contributing code and people back into the projects from which we draw value. And so if we weren't doing it and some others weren't doing it, then the ecosystem wouldn't exist. And so it's kind of important to us. It's kind of a core part of who we are as a business. One of the things that I think is a real opportunity, you know, for the greater good is that, you know, the value that we get from open source is huge. The value that others get from it is also huge, but we need to think about sustainability. And so, you know, the more people that contribute, the more value there is. And so we've been trying to help in the market. We've been trying to help to grow contributors. We've been trying to help to get more companies involved in open source. And so that, you know, you kind of growing the size of the pie, I suppose, is one of the things you could say about it as such. I think what's quite interesting as well is, like, in the context of, like, let's say the COVID app, you know, the early work and all the foundational work that went on to build that app, which happened in Ireland back in March and April. You know, there was a huge amount of effort and time that went into thinking about the design of the application, the security around it, the utility it provides to the end user, and all that stuff. Like, and there was we did a massive collaboration with the HSE and Department of Health here, and it's not to be overlooked. Like, I mean, the success of that application as it's gone global, it all goes back to the work that HSE and Department of Health did back in March and April of this year with us, you know. And literally, like, in Ireland, we built a better mousetrap. We built a better system than a lot of the other governments out there. And it's pointing cases that it's now being deployed in New York and in different parts of the US. Like, and the reason why it's been deployed there is because the technology and the design is really, really good. But to kind of go to the point of open source, so you know, the first version was built in Ireland. It was open sourced. There was a huge amount of value in there for other governments to be able to pick up and to start working with. But as each additional government, you know, wanted to take the technology and develop it further, all the enhancements and the new features and things, they went back into that open source project. So government by government, customer by customer, the core technology platform gets stronger and stronger and stronger, you know. And that's really the power of it. Like, and it's, you know, from a personal perspective, it's really interesting that you know, you find that the problems we're solving in Ireland are the same problems that the people are having in other countries, and the ability for us to in one society to solve a problem and then help another society with it that's really, really compelling, you know. And so I think there's a kind of I think there's a lesson out there as well for people in business and all that, like that actually this is a new way of thinking about collaboration. It's not about, you know, owning all the source code and not giving it to anyone and charging the most money to everyone and all that kind of thing. Like that's not in our, you might find other businesses would think more like that, but it's really not in our DNA, you know. And so at this point, like, what we're seeing is, like, there are governments in different parts of the world now who are picking up the technology, and they're able to take COVID Green, which is the open source project that was created, and they're able to stand it up. We will help them if we can or whatever, but we just want to see the thing deployed as many places as possible and the problem to be solved, you know?
Yeah. It's great. It's such a fantastic success story to come out of Waterford and for, like, a really wearing the green jersey, calling it COVID Green and everything. Thanks so much for telling us all about that. It's a real inspiring story, and I hope people get a lot of value from that. Thanks so much, Cian.
Oh, you're very welcome.